so grateful to have you. You're one of the pioneer journalists of our community, and I'm so excited to discuss so much that's happening in the nation, in our community today. So let's dig right into it. My first question has to be, what are you closely following up this week? There's a lot happening in the nation. There's a lot being debated upon, but what are some things that we need to focus on in this week?
Well, I'm paying close attention to what's happening with the elections. We're about 85 days to go till the election, but it's actually a lot sooner than that because people are going to start voting in advance, where you have mail-in ballots, which are subject of a lot of contention right now. But all of that's going to come a lot sooner than we think. November 3rd is much closer than we think, so I'm paying close attention to that. What happens with the vice presidential pick is also a big deal. And here in New York, we are paying close attention to what happens with schools opening. I think in many ways, our community in New York paid an enormous price in March, April, May, and June. And now we are in slightly better shape than the rest of the country, but we're seeing what can go wrong with terrible management across the country and those places that didn't lock down or lock down and open too soon. So great worry in terms of the election and great worry in terms of the pandemic.
Yes, for sure. In terms of, the candidate for the Democratic Party for the presidential election, since we are talking about elections here, what do you have to say about the anticipated news of the pick for Joe Biden for vice president? Who do you think it's going to be, and what should we look forward to on that?
That means it's Kamala Harris. There's going to be extra attention paid to by our community and people of color all over, because not just Black Americans are going to care, but also Indian Americans and Asian Americans. Asian Americans are the fastest voting bloc in the country, and to have them extra engaged in various states, battleground states, is going to matter in places like Ohio, places like Michigan and Pennsylvania and other places.
So, nomination for VP who is a person of color. What do you think is reflected from that?
I think it's a reflection of the reality of today. The tragedy of George Floyd's killing has been that one of the aftermaths of that has been that there's increased awareness of the ways in which this country has done a real disservice to people of color for centuries, not only with enslavement, but also in how the country made up for that or tried to make up for that. In many ways, it didn't bother at all. And nominating a person of color in that slot, and this time it would be, obviously, if it's a person of color, it would be a woman of color, is a big deal. And I think it'll give people who have felt that the Democratic Party after President Obama hadn't done enough to pay real attention to the needs of the African American community will be able to step up. After all, the fact that Joe Biden is the nominee is in part because of African Americans supporting him and being there for him through the nomination process. And so there is a kind of debt he owes them. And we should also say that Black women in this country have been the most steadfast supporters of the Democratic Party in the last several elections. And they're the reason that even though the Democrats have done badly in some of the races, the reason that they're in charge of the House of Representatives, for example, is because of Black women for the most part.
You know, in terms of looking at this racial strife that is happening in the nation, and also the issue of police brutality, since we are talking about the African American community here right now, what have you felt personally as a journalist reporting on these issues, as somebody who's also a minority person? And how do you look at this racial strife in the community, in the nation right now?
I think that this has been a reckoning that's taken way too long. The pandemic has done many things, but this is one of the things it's done, is highlighted all the ways in which this country has been unfair to people of color, and especially African Americans, Native Americans. I can tell you that I run a daily program around COVID-19 and covering it in many, many ways. And I hadn't done an episode or even talked about Native Americans in any significant way until episode number 145, or so 145 days into the pandemic. It just tells you the blind spots that we all have, and that it's important for us to understand that this country has been very good to Indian Americans, South Asians in many, many ways, and that we are here on the backs of the work put in by Latinos, Chinese Americans, African Americans, Native Americans, and we need to be, as a community, much more engaged in the fight for racial justice. One of the things that I have noted is that many Indian Americans who, as you know, come here either for, they originally came here for their graduate studies or came here on an H-1B visa and started working, they never got the education about what this country's true background is and why it is that it's a special thing that many people were able to walk into engineering jobs at leading corporations. I maintain one of the most accurate lists of Indian Americans who are in charge of global corporations, and you look at it, it's a stunning list, where whether you're looking at Adobe or Microsoft or Google or Albertsons, one of the big chain stores, grocery stores in America, and the list goes on, and the Gap, for example, right? All of these incredible organizations, companies run by Indian Americans, we benefit from being overeducated, and even while we acknowledge that there are South Asians in this country who have enormous poverty that they deal with and other issues, we have believed our own hype about being the most successful, the most accomplished, the highest educated. All of this we believe, even as in this country, even during the so-called the good days when the economy was roaring, we had a large percentage of Indian Americans in just our biggest cities who were unemployed, underemployed, and going hungry. So we need to acknowledge our role in benefiting from the history of America, and then we need to do our part to help America as we all go on to the next step in this process.
Yes, definitely. And let's not forget, we are talking about great disparities in the nation in terms of healthcare, in terms of economy, in terms of so much else. You are running a daily COVID-19 show right now. And, this is a good time for me to ask you this question. As a person of media, as a journalist, and as somebody who's daily reporting on COVID-19, how do you think the industry has been towards this pandemic, and how have the reporting been according to you? Do you think journalism is doing its work right at this current moment?
Well, this is a great question and something that I think about all the time. I write a newsletter where my headline this week was "The Humbling of America," and the last 5 months have put America in the worst possible light because America had the worst possible outcome with this crisis. So some of that has to be blamed on Washington, at the president's feet, Congress, governors, mayors, and others who did not meet this moment. And there are 150,000 people dead because of it. There would always have been tens of thousands of people who would have died, but there are tens of thousands of people who need not have died if we had been prepared. So it's a failure of leadership. It's also a failure of technology. And the big tech companies that should have done a better job have become terrible at controlling disinformation, misinformation, and we are paying that price as well. And when it comes to the media, there isn't one thing called the media, even though I even use it that way, or the press. The fact is that journalism and media is comprised of so many different voices, and it isn't just the New York Times or the Washington Post or CNN or MSNBC or any of these things that matter. We are now looking at so many partisan players who are invested in lying to the American people every day. And because journalism is all about objectivity and being fair, we are very comfortable saying, this is what they say about masks, and this is what the other side says about masks, as if they are equal when they're not. And so journalism has failed, and so has other things like our processes for health, our systems. You know that in places like India and others, Indians Indians in India come to the United States to get health care if they can afford it at the highest level. Prime ministers and businessmen and others come here, famous actresses. They come here because they understand that America is the best at healthcare. Well, we have now exposed that apart from the very best who can get and afford it, America suffers greatly in how it treats its everyday people.
Do you believe or do you think that journalism has become a full political issue right now?
Well, journalism has fallen right into the trap set for it by the demagogues, because now if you don't follow and listen and parrot everything that they want you to say, you will be tarred with some kind of online trouble. And especially women are finding that anytime they're reporting on something that is a little bit controversial, they get attacked. It's hard to be a woman online any day of the week, but to be a woman journalist covering politics is almost impossible. I get a slight taste of it when I might retweet something a woman journalist has said, and then you see immediately the attacks, and that's just kind of glancing blows or parenthetical blows to me. But to see it in how women experience it every day is stunning and shocking.
Definitely. When we're looking at all of this, I have to ask you, going more into our interview, let's discuss the elections, because we're talking about a lot that is happening in the government, a lot that is happening on separate levels, a lot that is happening in journalism, but it's all a big thing for elections, as we all know, November 3rd. How do you think we as South Asians should look at these elections, and are we doing our role properly in these elections?
Well, first of all, everybody must register.
Yes.
Everybody must vote. I mean, we come from countries where when they're in their democratic phases of their history, they want everybody to vote. And you come to this country, and the idea is to make it as difficult to vote as possible, including the fact that the voting day is not a holiday, the fact that polling places are going to be constrained, the fact that it's hard to get access, that they're asking for all kinds of IDs, and the president himself injecting into this great confusion around mail-in ballots. So when you add all of that up, we as voters have to work that much harder. In places like India, where people do go to vote, and you often see 65, 70, 75, 80% turnout. In parts of America, the turnout is much less, and in some places it's high. So what Indian Americans and South Asians need to understand is that every vote matters. If you're in a swing state, it matters. And what the swing state has changed, it's going to come down. This time I spoke to Charles Franklin, who's a leading pollster for one of my interviews, and he said last time, as you all know, it came down to 3 states. It came down to Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and the 70,000 votes. This time you add in Florida and Arizona, and you can see that it's going to there's going to be just a few thousand votes could make the difference. And so you have to pay real attention. You have to vote, and then not only focus on the top of the ticket. You have to look down ballot as well. That makes a big difference in what we're trying to achieve here, because we can get caught up in and look at me also only talking about the presidential race, when we have races of consequence in almost every state, and we have to make sure we all vote, no matter what their role is.
According to you, do you think mail-in ballots are going to be a game changer for these elections? And I'm asking that perhaps to see if you think that will have a higher turnout for these elections.
Well, I think that we have seen in the 2018 elections, which is the last place we can go to look, is to see that there was a very good turnout. There was an energized set of voters that came out, and we are looking at something absolutely unprecedented, a global pandemic, voting during a global pandemic and global financial crisis, and how do we make sure that we are also dealing with this other pandemic that's going on, which is the pandemic of misinformation. So there was a time when you could understand that anything said from the White House is more or less accurate. It's not always accurate. Not everybody's perfect, but at least more or less accurate in the interests of the American people. And there are a few things that were sacred, such as the importance of the press, such as the importance of voting, such as the importance of being truthful as much as you can. And that has now shifted to a place where we cannot trust what is being said to us by our highest leaders. And so even when it comes to voting, we don't know what's going to happen. And that's why, even though I say 85 days is pretty close, there is still a long way to go in this election. And anything and everything will happen. And that's before we inject the Russians into this. So the Russians are going to play a role in here, and that's going to have an impact. Other state actors may also play a role. If you believe the intelligence reports that say that Russia is actively working to re-elect Trump, and the Chinese prefer Biden. The reporting isn't that the China is doing what Russia is doing, but they could. And if they do, what happens? So this is going to be a very difficult time for voters, and we need to be high information voters. We need to pay attention. That's why we need shows like yours that are covering this so our community knows what the value of its vote. I talk to everyday South Asians, and when I talk to them, they will often say to me how difficult it is for them to vote, or why is it worthwhile voting? What is the point? We live in New York. It doesn't matter because it's all controlled by one party. All of that may be true, but we have to make the effort to vote because that's what's going to help this nation.
Let's educate the audience a little bit more here on elections. According to you, when looking at the South Asian population living in the United States, what are our key issues that we need to reflect on while we're ready to vote for these elections?
So one good thing is we're not one community, right? There is not one African American community. There's not one Latino community. For example, I did some work in 2016, 2 weeks before the election. We did a big concert with Univision, the big Spanish language television network, a concert of the biggest stars in Hispanic music on the border between the U.S. and Mexico to talk about the issues, to get people to vote. And as you remember, the candidate Trump started by calling Mexicans rapists and criminals and all of that, and that's how he started. So you wouldn't have thought that he would have done, as he did, better than Mitt Romney in the percentage of the Hispanic vote he got, right? You just couldn't have imagined that would be possible, but he did. And so that tells you that the Latino community is diverse, the African American community is diverse, and so is the South Asian community. But there are some things that I think we can agree on. We agree, for the most part, that immigration is a good thing for this country. It's helped make it what it is. It has made us the community we are because we're able to come here either to study or to work and stay on and have that opportunity. And we've done that for 50 years, and that's why we're the community we are today. So that's something that people should pay close attention to. The fact is that this White House has been held hostage by someone who does not think even one brown immigrant is worth having in this country. And I tell Indian Americans who are IIT graduates who think they're exempt from all this conversation about immigration because they are IIT grads or tech people, I tell them that President Trump and Stephen Miller would rather have as many Norwegian fishermen as he could get rather than have one IIT engineer. And that's what they don't understand. And by the way, the Norwegians have no interest in coming here. They have a wonderful life, a socialized medicine, Medicare health system that keeps them healthy and safe. So they're not coming here. But so if you say we agree that immigration matters, that immigration is a bedrock of this country, the bedrock of why all of us are here. We may be first, second, third, fifth generation, but we're all immigrants. So that's one thing that I think we're interested in. Strong Indo-U.S. ties for Indian Americans, strong Pakistani American ties for Pakistanis, etc. Strong relationship with South Asia, I think, is important. Seeing how China and the U.S., what relationship they have for trade matters, because that opens up opportunities and problems in South Asia, is another thing that we care about. But the other issues that we care about that are purely domestic, healthcare for everyone, because we understand the South Asian body seems to be susceptible to a lot more physical ailments than other people. We come from a region in the world where already our life expectancy is less, and then you come here and the incidence of diabetes and heart attacks and heart disease, all of that's elevated. So we need better health care for everybody is something that I think we can agree on, that we care about. And giving good paying jobs to every single American is something that we can agree on. So those are the things that people should look at if you take it as a whole, and when you decide who you vote for, not just for president, but for every seat down that ballot.
I can also say healthcare, immigration has been such a huge point of conversation, especially with this pandemic, with the economic fallout. Only time will tell where we go, with this. We were talking about President Trump. I have to ask you here, what do you have to say about his recent executive orders? And do you think Congress will be able to decide something on the stimulus package very soon?
So I can tell you that everybody that I've watched talked about it, and everything I've read about it says that this is not going to take place because it puts the onus on states to provide that first $100 of the several $100s that have been promised. And second, President Trump doesn't really care about any of this, right? He's just there for the show. And the show made him president, and the show is what he hopes will help him get reelected. So it's also as like one of the things that we as a community need to do is to read our civics, understand how America, as I said, was developed, and what we owe our brothers and sisters in the African American, Latino, and Native American communities. But we also need to know basic civics about America, that in fact Congress has the power of the purse and not the presidency. So when somebody tells you at a socially distant dinner that, hey, President Trump is doing this and it's a great thing, well, you should know that President Trump cannot do that. President Obama cannot do that. Nobody can do that. President Biden, if he gets elected, cannot do that. That's just the reality. And so we have a president who's divorced from reality, who tells you that the virus is just going to go away, that children don't get sick from this. Children don't even get it. When we saw today's reports that 100,000 children were tested positive in just 2 weeks in July, and we're heading straight into the craziness of school opening, school reopening. Another thing our community cares about is international students, and the hundreds of thousands of international students that come here. So many of us came first as international students, and we have helped make America a better place as a result. And so we care, and we're seeing the consulates are closed in other countries. And when will students be able to come? Most are going to come in January now, instead of coming in that traditional September start.
You did just reflect back on reopening, and I have you for a few minutes, so I want to get into it real quick. Reopening of schools has definitely become a political issue more than it needed to be. Where do you see it sort of go right now, especially when you're looking at places like New York City, which had, which saw such tragedy with COVID-19 cases and deaths? How do we sort of understand as a community, as parents, as caregivers, if our children should be sent to school?
This is such a big question. I have 12th graders, twin 12th graders, and the question is, do we send them to school? We're seeing that there is some kind of plan in most schools, but not everybody has that. You have to ask yourself, you have to be safe. Of course, children should be in school. That's number one. But 1A or one above number one is they have to be safe. And schools in America, public schools especially, aren't just schools. They're also places for safety, for refuge, for food, for low-income children. So are there ways in which we could create those opportunities, but also give the online learning ability and opportunity to everyone. So that's what has to be done, and especially living in New York, where the systems are so complicated and so large, that's where the added complications come from.
Yes, definitely. While I still have you here, my question, and that's something I've been wanting to ask you here, we just discussed a lot of things that is happening in the nation in terms of the economic crisis and the healthcare crisis. What, according to you, could truly fix the solution? We're looking at something which is worse than the Great Depression. We're looking at, incidents of great disparity in healthcare. What is the solution of this?
Well, one solution is to stop the pandemic. I mean, if we had done what we did, I believe, and what the experts say is, if we had done what we did in New York uniformly with a mask mandate across the country, we would have had a chance at beating this. Now we have no chance of beating this in the immediate future. What we need, Neil Kashkari, who is a Federal Reserve governor, he said that what you need is a mask mandate and a shutdown for 4 to 6 weeks of the entire economy. I know it's painful. I know it's difficult. But if you do that, then you have a chance of cutting this off. If we had started that 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, we would have been in a different place. But every day we delay on the mask mandate, we are in trouble. And that's what we're seeing now. And giving people a few dollars here and there, they need it, so let's give it to them. But let's have a plan, for God's sake, to save this country and to save the planet.
What would you say to our elected officials right now?
I would say a national mask mandate today, and get your stimulus package ready, but make sure that people who need the help, because we're seeing the frontline workers, just the way we were panicking about our frontline workers in New York in May and June and April, we're now panicking about them in the Southwest and places like that. So we need to help them, but we need to make sure that we could, August is traditionally a month where a lot of people take vacation. If we had had an August vacation for the country, stay at home, put on your masks, and be socially distant, we may have saved the country. But now I am very worried that it's almost too late now.
My last question to you has to be, at this point, what is going to be your focus for the next 4 to 5 weeks?
My focus is, how do we make sure we have accurate information for everybody who is paying attention, and then how do we get more people to pay attention, and also how do we save the economy of this country? What are the things that we can do? And at the same time, watching out for all the complications that are going to come from this election. It's going to be an election like we've never seen in history, and combining it with the pandemic and the financial crisis and the racial justice crisis, we are going to have a very complicated 90 days.
For sure. Well, here's to hoping the best for everyone, and obviously hoping that everyone goes out and vote. I truly appreciate you for your time on ITV Gold, Mr. Srinivasan.
Thank you very much.